Hello, everybody. That looks good. Things look okay. Okay, let's go check out here. Check a few little things here. Open the email. I forgot to check email last time. Need to check email, and here I am. Apparently, I'm live. Hope everybody is all right. So, here we go. I'll check a few things here. I'm going to bring up the IBI space in case we need some schedules. We're going to bring up HF Underground in case of pirates. And I think we've got enough here. There we go. So, hey, everybody, welcome aboard. This is the Wednesday edition of the live show where we talk about radio. And I wasn't here last Saturday. It was a very, very complicated day. Actually didn't sleep on the night from Friday to Saturday with all the with my friend being very sick, and even Saturday was a tough one. So took some time off to recharge the batteries, and of course we're here today. I'm tired today. I don't know if it's the same virus or something, but since yesterday I've been a little more tired than usual. So here we go. Welcome. This is a show about radio. We're here live twice a week. Wednesday for North America at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 0 hours Universal Time, which is Thursday for a lot of people around the world, technically. We're also on Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's 20 hours Universal Time. And we just have a lot of fun talking radio, exchanging radio, and debating radio. And it's always cool to be here. So my Wednesday evening drink, which is just plain cranberry juice with sparkling water, no alcohol on the Wednesday show. And here we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about radio. We're going to talk about a milestone on my channel also. We're going to talk about a lot of things. My name is Gilles. I'm located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. That's the northeast part of North America. And we have a show, of course, that talks about pretty much every aspect of radio and so on. We also have a beautiful chat room with wonderful people that are just great and help each other. And if you're new to the hobby, this is the best place. And it's really a place where we're going to, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about it. If you want to have an honest opinion of what a radio is about, this is a place, because this is where, I'm not going to say it, better than it is. I have no reason to either bash a radio or not. And it's just, anyways, we're going to talk about it a little bit and also talk about a series that I had an idea to do it. So once the show is over, you have we have the Facebook group, which has a lot of activity. There's a lot of people, and it's pretty cool to see the activity there and what people are sharing. It's crazy to think that we are the last day of August. I think for a lot of us, September means going towards the end of summer and into the fall and cooler weather and so on. And that it's going to be interesting. I mean, we're propagation is definitely changing. It's showing. I can tell you that it's really showing with the shorter days in the northern hemisphere. And we're getting into a time where I actually enjoyed the listening because September, October, a little bit like I'd say February, March, or March, April, but more like February, March is a very, very interesting time for specific places to hear around the world. Remember one thing: each season has its specific targets that you can actually get. I often hear people telling me, well, oh, I hear that winter is the best for shortwave. Every season is the best for shortwave. There's no best season for shortwave. It depends what you are into and depends what you want to listen to. There are in each season specific areas around the world, specific stations that are going to be heard that you won't hear at other times. I talk about how an example, Radio New Zealand evening here in the East Coast in Montreal is a summer thing. So I over the years I've had um, a lot of the things that the listening in the past that I had are sometimes associated with a specific season. As I was a teenager, and of course, maybe maybe the fact it was summer vacation for school, which is always, I think, for a lot of us, great memories of our teenage years and childhood. But I remember listening to Radio Australia on those high frequencies in the summertime, and was I was a teenager, 17795 and 21740, two frequencies I remember in the summer evenings coming really well into Montreal. But that's the summer thing, as we were getting into the as we were getting into the the fall and all of that. Well, we were losing that. There were, then Radio Australia was a morning thing, the 9580 that we came in all the time. Uh, you know, and I remember one of the listening that I had also back then was listening to United Arab Emirates that had their English broadcast. And I think it was like at 03 UT or something. And it was on 15400 or 15420 or 435, somewhere there. And that was also a summer thing. That was my summer listening. Only in the summer did I get that. Wintertime was different. And as well as having the wintertime, and the wintertime lower frequencies usually propagate well. Tropical bands back then were full of African stations, and then Central South America would kick in. Benefited from longer nights, and so each season has its broadcasts and its signals to tune to at different frequencies and different times of day. And it's very important to know that. Too many people still have the impression that shortwave is like AM FM broadcasts, which it's not. If you hear a station today, better log it. Better, if you want to send a reception report, maybe do it now, for a very simple reason, because you will maybe not hear it tomorrow. It could be special conditions that are bringing that. I remember also back in the days, a lot of stations didn't have relays. Today, relays is if you hear beep beeps, it's my weather station that is counting the lightning. There's lightning strikes, as I believe there's some thunderstorms heading our way. So I'm going to check the weather radar here. So possible thunderstorms heading our way. And yes, there is a thunderstorm watch. And yeah, look at that. I'm smack in the middle between two lines of thunderstorms right here. So that gives you an idea. And so there was no relays, and a lot of the stations from Asia were direct. Radio Beijing which was just today China radio. That you would hear it direct. A lot of the NHK Radio Japan broadcasts were from the transmitter side near Tokyo, and that was the time in October, and in March or February, March were the times when the Asians would come in at those frequencies and times in the evening. It was there are specific broadcasts in specific areas, depending on the frequencies, that are really for each season. And do take the time to check it out, because you'll be surprised at what you might hear actually on the bands. So, we're going to talk about a few things before I start talking about saying hello to everybody. One of the first things is about the Ethon Elite 750, which is on my channel, which doesn't please the review, which doesn't please some people. Apparently, some people say that I'm biased. I don't know. That's the funny thing is, how can you be biased when there is no attachment to anything? I'm not attached to a brand. I'm not attached by any means. I buy my radios to have the best fairness possible. Buying my own radio is the way to say, well, you know what? I can talk crap about it if it is. I can talk good about it if it is. But I don't have a free review copy. Sorry, guys. Went through the wrong hole. So, by buying the radios, I just say what I want, and there's no such thing as I prefer a brand over others. I have people saying, well, I love Texan more than anything else, or it's like, no, it's just that I'm sorry, but the reason I talk a lot about the Texan receivers is because they're great. And if they weren't, I would, or if they are no good, I will say they're no good. And, actually, one guy that complained about said he would never watch my videos again, said, yeah, well, you like Texan only. Well, it's made by Texan. Just saying. Texan is making the Ethon Elite 750. So wake up and learn a little bit more. Educate yourself. I say it as it is, and I think this is where this channel is the perfect channel for many reasons. A lot of people, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, one guy, oh, no numbers. You don't need numbers. I don't need to take out, lab equipment to start noticing flaws in receivers. Using it is enough. And this is not a lab. This is we listen to we listen to the radio, tune around with it, test it, and then I can compare it with others that I like, and I can, in all fairness, say what's wrong. And it's easy to see the flaws in the radio when you're used to it. One guy came up in the comments and said, well, you can't hear when you're on frequency. Yes, you can. Actually, it comes from the good old days, and I'm sure a lot of you can do that. When we were in the good old days of tuning analog radios with that, needle, we developed a keen ear in knowing that we were on frequency, because we had no help except, our ears that needle was so, approximate that we couldn't tune perfectly looking at the dial. It was impossible. Well, that sense that we developed actually is still here. And even though I do have the frequency display, I don't look only at the frequency the radio's telling me. I listen. So I know that my Texan PL680 is off frequency, for example. And it's easy to hear on the Elite 750. Actually, somebody confirmed even more than what I was hearing. When you use the wide filter, roughly 3 kilohertz off, you see that there's the peak in audio. But I had noticed that on each side there was some kind of a weird peak. And somebody in the comments yesterday said, well, I noticed that around 3 or 4 kilohertz, there's like a peak on each side. And it's like, yeah, there you go. You're just confirming things that I hear also with the radios. So, this is all about, using the knowledge of 40 years of radio listening, of hundreds of radios that I've listened to and tested and played with, the knowledge of reading a lot of reviews and a lot of technical details about how radios are made and should be done right. One fact that I find really interesting is that I found technical details of the Elite 750. When they come to the bandwidth, narrow, wide, none of the technical details give you a number of how many kilohertz it should be. Of course they don't. They don't want to tell you it's 20 kilohertz on the wide one. They know that's bad. No numbers. I came yesterday with a review that was in monitoring times of 2012, I think, or 2013. And the guy, Larry Van Horn, actually, that reviewed it, his verdict in the end is that, well, I don't know what to say about this thing. I got some really mixed feeling about this radio. He's not saying it's good. It's not. And you know what? He doesn't kind of use the word it's bad, but I guess he's stuck in the fact that monitoring times had a lot of ads for that radio. And, I started thinking about that when we had Passport to World Band Radio. One of the things that came to mind in Passport to World Band Radio for me was all of the reviews that in general were, pretty fair, but you can't help but think that some of the radios that they reviewed also had ads in the book. So it's kind of tough to say their flaws really loud because you might not have the advertiser, next year or whatever. That's crazy. And this is what I love about what I do here is I have the full freedom of saying what I think about whatever. And I'm going to do a new series in the coming days. It's going to be all the radios that I talk about that I love. What are their flaws? Because they all have flaws. We say it all the time. There's always no radio's perfect. They all have something. They all have something that, well, in perfect world, that should not be like that, including the H501X and the 99E by Texan and so on. So the series is going to focus on what are the major flaws of each radio that I love. It's a kind of contradiction. And I'm thinking about that because I'm saying, well, you know what? Maybe that's going to be kind of a balance. By having a balance of the good and the bad of everything, maybe it's going to be a little more in the fairness of things because, You know, it's just crazy. It's the first time, I've reviewed a lot of radios, but it's totally the first time that it creates such a stir to talk about a radio and give my personal honest opinion on it. And I've had some of these comments in the past, but I've never had them so intense as in the last week or so. So it's kind of interesting, and it's I guess maybe it's because that radio's been selling for such a long time. Maybe people have an impression that, well, it's a big, fancy, good-looking radio, and it's been selling for 15 years. Means it must be one of the best radios out there, which is not the case. And when you go back and you don't know a lot, you just talk about radios or buy a radio based on, oh, look how cool that radio looks. You have no idea if it's good or not. And, it's only later when you have the knowledge that suddenly, um, you know, you might notice that, oh, look at that radio's crappy. My realistic DX100 that I started with. Man, what a crappy rig when you compare that today. But I didn't know better. I had no idea back then. So that's going to be an interesting series, I think, to look at the flaws of the radios I love, also at the same time. And then there's the the misunderstanding, the misunderstanding of of a lot of the details and the technical details and what people emphasize. And flaws in the radio also might not be noticed by people that don't do specific things. The Texan H501 and PL990 have one big flaw, and it's that above 25 megahertz, single sideband is almost unusable. The oscillator is kind of out of control. And I noticed after my reviews, because I noticed when I actually had signals to tune. So I later posted and talked about it, and I talk about it regularly, and some people have come back noticing that too. Um, so it's there are things you might not notice if you just don't tune. So somebody that never tunes above 25 megahertz will have a Texan H501X and single sideband, and you know it's and every other frequency range is going to be perfect and it's going to sound great. But there's a flaw there, and each radio has flaws depending on how you use it. I suspect a lot of people that have that big Eton Elite 750 or Grendic 750 or Texan S2000, which are all the same, maybe don't necessarily have used it that much on shortwave, for example. A lot of them might have used it mostly to listen to broadcasts. It's talking about that guy that has that Grenadier Satellite 800 that I used to fix his computer. That he just used it to listen to one frequency on FM. That's it. I think there are people out there that have that radio, never really tuned shortwave more than maybe a few minutes, and they see my review and they're like, well, that radio is not crappy. I love it to listen to my local radio station. Yeah, because that's all you do with it. So yeah, you won't notice a flaw necessarily. And that white filter on AM with a local station might actually give it a sound quality that you like. So for you, that's not a flaw that you don't understand why somebody else is saying, well, there's a flaw in the white filter. It all depends on how you use the radio, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that, use that radio in a very minimal way, and shortwave is not a big part of what they do. And then it's easy to overlook and not really notice anything, you know? Okay, Francis Moore, nice to have you here, Francis, from the UK. We have Bruce N9BH, nice to have you here from Missouri. We have all Arthur's Out of Crafter's Kitchen, nice to have you here from Massachusetts, enjoying the Ethon 750 videos. And yeah, Ethon is right now a big mess with the satellite HD also. Brett Wayne, nice to have you here from New York, Salamanca, New York, KC2 and XP. Matt, MDK2 in Denver, Colorado, nice to have you on board. Master Players Radio and Television plus Gaming, nice to have you here. Bobby Burgess. So you've got, you just decide to start doing that channel right now? Nice to have you here. WA5107 SWL in Morgan City, Louisiana. We have Kamikaze 76, West Michigan. Rob in Phoenix, Arizona. We have that's else we have there. Fred Waterer, nice to have you on board. Says he wasn't started yet, or Paul is hosting tonight. I actually bought a security camera because I have tons of cat that actually come and steal stuff, but mostly because there's been a raccoon that's been messing up with my garbage on the balcony in the back. Now, I've never seen it, but I think it's a raccoon because it left some poop on the balcony, and it's not cat poop for sure. So I bought a security camera because I thought, well, you know what? Maybe it's going to be interesting to see the ins and outs of cats, including Paul and Mignon, and also see what's happening during the night while I'm sleeping. What are the animals that come over? Danny Shortwave Radio DX, nice to have you on board. What else do we have? Skip Wave DX, nice to have you here from the Catskill Mountains in New York. We have ManMax 2069, nice to have you here. James Farley from Old Bridge, New Jersey, KD2GUZ. Anthony France, nice to have you here from Florida. Chuck, nice to have you here from South Texas, N5KVO. Yeah, a lot of the USSR Soviet radios, they look so weird and so different from a lot of from us, especially the old ones. Francis, have a Texan PL 880. The antenna socket puts out 2.65 volts. I'm trying to use an external antenna. It does not work. Because you're not supposed to use, and you don't need anything. What do you plug in? Just a wire antenna? Because that voltage, it might not be a real problem in the sense that it might not at all be, it might not have any amps in it. You know, it could be just like a very weak current. Because you're not there's no need for anything special on any of these Texan receivers to have an outdoor antenna. If it doesn't work with the indoor antenna, I suspect that your connector that you use to go to the antenna socket, the tip of the connector isn't touching correctly with the if it's a long wire, for example, the long wire should be on that tip, and the rest is either ground or nothing, or depending on if you use a coax, you could put the rest on the coax shield. But there's nothing you need special on the Texan PL 880 than any other radio for an outdoor antenna. Gordon Series, nice to have you here. Bob, WA2SQQ, nice to have you here from New Jersey. Ralph from Southern New Jersey. DJW883, Southeast Pennsylvania. Osakama, nice to have you here from Black Forest, Germany. We have Christian Marcoux, salut, j'espère que ça va bien. Nice to have you here from North Bay, Ontario. We have Simon Templar, nice to have you here. John, nice to have you here. M0JFE in the UK. Anthony France, do you get to choose which ads are shown on your channel? Nope. The only choice I have on the ads, well, you get to choose. Technically, in some way, I could. There's categories that they give me, but you just leave everything on. The only real big choice that you have is, do you accept that adult ads could be played or not? But I haven't seen much of those, so I just leave everything on. It's there. It's I mean the stuff that's played sometimes is so weird. I remember looking at what ads were playing, and one of them on China Radio International video was "Meet Chinese Women." I was like, "Whoa, okay, that is weird." Wii U Radio's Tech and Intros channel. Nice to have you here, Michael. Nice to have you here from Melbourne, Australia. VK3 MPO. Nice to have you on board, my friend. Darren, nice to have you here from Melbourne, Australia. Also, pretty cool to have people from all over the world, specifically on the other side of the world. Romanet, I have all of a sudden come up on a bunch of radio videos, and I'm not being disrespectful, but what attracts people to this hobby, I'm not sure I get it, since the internet allows you in so many ways. Yeah, it's very different. It's radio is something that you have or not in the blood, I think. um you know Remove internet, the fact that even in the past, without any other choice than radio, you have the people that just don't understand why you listen to the static in the radio stations on shortwave and stuff like that. I think that's really, really what it is all about. And shortwave radio is very different because even though there's less choice today, most of the broadcasts you would have on a shortwave station is dedicated to an international audience. What you hear on the internet, for the most part, is only for local audiences. So you don't have the same info, the same feel. And the stations, most on shortwave, a lot of them are the postcard, or they're representative of what the country is all about. Once again, on the internet, all you get is local broadcasts, not counting that many countries that you'll listen on the internet have local language only. For example, if you want to listen to, um, you know, the Czech Republic, you don't have a lot of stuff except in Czech or in local languages there. But you'll have Radio Prague on shortwave that is in English, because it appeals and talks to the international audience. There's that. There's the fact that a lot of there's something special. There's nothing special, for example, in listening to a a broadcast over the internet. Nothing magic about it. Well, it is kind of magic, yes, in a way, but there's nothing magic about it. But having your little radio with just a telescopic antenna that gets an invisible signal coming from 5,000 kilometers away, that has some magic to it. But it's a very, you like it or you don't. And it's pretty much a lot like that in the radio hobby. And you're accustomed to it. We all know people that are like, why the hell are you doing this? And people that are just going crazy and find it so cool. It's very, very special and very unique. What else do we have? Shortwave radio passion. Nice to have you here. John had a virus was horrible. Joe, nice to have you here from Newmarket, Virginia. Patrick from Washington State. Gabrielle, nice to have you here from Uruguay. Brian Penny, back to civilization. Nice to have you here from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Uncle Justin, nice to have you here from the Finger Lakes of New York State. KB2RMC. Nice to have you on board. Miji, nice to have you here. We have Keegan DXer, nice to have you on board. Mad Radio DXer, nice to have you here. We have Ron C, nice to have you here from Saint-Hubert, Quebec. TB Ostrowski, nice to have you here from Medicine Hat, Alberta. Cyberflyer 1, nice to have you here. We have Don Royal, nice to have you on board from Surprise, Arizona. WA7330 SWL. We have Christopher Coup. Does the SDR play RSD18? Have the trunking capability. You mean the SDR play devices like the SDRs? There is a possibility of trunking with some SDRs, but you have to use you have to use plugins like from SDR Sharp software. There's a host of plugins on some SDRs that can actually do trunking. Some even do P25, digital mode, stuff like that. I haven't played a lot with it, but mostly a lot of it is really, really focused on one piece of software, which is SDR Sharp, which is the one that has a lot of plugins. Now, SDR Sharp is unaccessible to an SDR Play devices because the Airspy company that owns SDR Sharp wants to make sure SDR Play cannot use the software because it's competition. But yep, you can do some trunking and stuff like that. Depends on what SDR gonna use for it. MDK2 Matt says, I think KBS World in the morning, really all done. Last decent copy August 15th. Yeah, we're getting there, eh? Even here, Radio New Zealand and 720 has not been very good in the last few days. TVD Xer, salut, ça va bien, j'espère que tu vas bien. What else do we have? Greg, nice to have you on board. Yeah, my friend's already better than he was. So we're going to cross our fingers. Michael, nice to have you on board. Joseph, nice to have you here from Central California coast. Penguin, nice to have you here from Albuquerque. Miji says, someone was looking for a radio that has airband and marine band. I was looking at the Steepletone MBR 1051. Finally ordered it. I hear it has some bleed over. Other reviews say it's fine. For the most part, it's the problem is for the most part the problem is the fact that anything that is VHF UHF is better on a scanner radio. You better buy a scanner radio. Even a cheap scanner radio does a better job than a lot of those radios that might have other bands on it. So to name a second, I can just say that it really all has to do with Airspy that refuses to give access to SDR Play. Airspy is a very bad player in the SDR world. I can tell you that. Mitch, nice to have you here from Buckeye, Arizona. And we have, I'm trying to get down as fast as possible. I want to do a little bit of, we're going to be Cold War a little bit tonight. We're going to do some stuff. I'm going to play some recordings of Cold War, and we're going to talk about the passing of someone that I think now, depending on the age you are, I'm the guy that my knowledge and my first contact of USSR and communism and all of that and the Cold War really starts at, you really kind of notice that when you're a little older. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about that we're gonna go and get some broadcasts from the old Soviet times of the Soviet Empire. From Czechoslovakia to radio. Poland radio Warsaw and stuff like that. Radio Tirana. And talk a little bit about the feel. I think if there's something that a lot of us today we talk about how what's happening with Ukraine and all is gives some kind of a feel of Cold War, but it's nothing like the Cold War. It's a pale. Um, we can't really compare it, unless Russia would decide to invade other countries. Now that would change, but anyways, we'll talk about that a little bit. What else do we have? Undecided hobbies in Ontario, and I hear on my local weather band that they are discontinuing the weather band within the next 6 months. Yeah, they're doing this here in Quebec also. They've closed one station that was at Mont Tremblant, the Laurentide part. I would actually recommend, because when you listen to it, they give a phone number, and anybody that is in an area where the weather broadcasts are to be shut down, you should call, and you should give and explain why it's important for that broadcast to continue. These people are on the impression that the broadcasts are useless because we all have our smartphones and have the weather on it, but they forget that a smartphone in the middle of the woods and in the middle of a lake doesn't work anymore. And I think it was last year, I made a video to kind of tell everybody to call. They wanted to close the Mont Tremblant in the Laurentide, and they wanted to close one in the Estrie region on near Sherbrooke. And I told everybody, call and complain. And what happened in the end is that the one on Mont Tremblant closed, but the one on the Estrie region actually stayed on. So that means enough people called in to say, no, you can't shut down that service. It is very important. Not counting that, think of all the devices, the little alert radios that people have that actually, turn on automatically when there's a weather warning and weather alert. It's dumb. I find it so dumb that Environment Canada, to cut cost, is shutting down those stations that give the weather that they cost pennies to operate. Come on. So you got school tomorrow. Yeah, September. It's that time, eh? Run. Do ham operators have a backup? Example, sealed equipment for a giant EMP pulse and so on. I would say that the amount of hams today that are capable of operating in emergency situations is probably a lot less than it used to be in the past. We've come to a point where the grid is so solid and all of that and a lot of hams don't have that drive to be able to operate. I think every ham operator should have a possibility, even if it's with a handheld with several batteries, to operate in emergency situations. The EMP thing, well, we would have to have a nuclear explosion or something like that, and that's going to anyways already cut out a lot of people. So but some people are capable of that. That's why we have the field day that happens every year, twice a year, the winter field day and the summer field day. They are there to show how ham radio operators can, in times of emergencies, set up and operate without having to use the power grid and makeshift antennas and so on. One big example of that, and that was extremely important here, was in 1998 when we got the big ice storm here. There was a lot of people without power, and actually, the ham radio operators actually helped tremendously in emergency situations back then. So there are some, definitely, but I think there's not enough. And I think, when I was passing my ham course, I think if there's one aspect of ham radio that should really be emphasized more is, and publicized also to the public, because the public just thinks that we're CBers, CBers. That's all. And the reason why, because look at what the demonstrations are when we see ham operators on TV or something. It always looks like CB radio. There would be a huge benefit to the ham community to change the focus of what ham operators are all about, and show that, we are capable in emergency situations of operating and helping the public, and show that we're here to help if something happens. That would, first of all, probably publicize the ham amateur radio a little more, and some people might think, wow, this is so cool that ham radio operators are there for that. It would also give a more positive look into ham operators, honestly, because the image of ham operators is very simple. It's, for most people, we're CBers. We just do CB radio, and that needs to change. And if we could talk about it and change the mentality of what people know about ham radio, that would be a very positive point for amateur operators all over the world. Volodya, nice to have you on board from the West Coast. Nice to have you here. Tibisowski, by the way, thanks for mentioning Space Weather app. I don't quite understand it, but I'm studying nonetheless. Assume it's relevant to shortwave listening. Yeah, definitely. Maybe we could try to take a look a little bit about it. Chris Alpha Tango, nice to have you on board in 3WER. Nice to have you here. Michael says it's an honest review. Agree that's the radio I use. Your tuning tip helps. Jason VE9 JMC, nice to have you on board, listening intently while rebuilding a 20 amp power supply. Ron, the troll comes in many colors. You should be used to it, but respect has two sides, and I think you are ultra polite. You can't change the world. Nope. Dave, nice to have you on board. We have John Beckham, nice to have you here. Mike Water, 1958, nice to have you here. Danny Shortwave Radio DX, that guy took it way too personal about a review of a radio. Think about that. Something else must be wrong with that dude. Yeah. I don't know. 000, nice to have you here. KD2ANN. Zen Pharaoh's following along with a glass of chocolate milk and not an Ethan Elite Excelsior Exotic Errata. The same old radios and pile of loop antennas, including for today my 9-inch passive loop. Cool. Horizontal Crafter's Kitchen, reviewing the flaws of radios will likely be more extensive, as even the best radios have more weaknesses than strengths. Hands-on use of one tells more than any lab report. Yep, definitely. And you can have numbers say whatever you want. There's nothing there. There was a very interesting. You can compare it to PCs. I was listening today to a podcast, and the guy was saying that he reviewed an HP laptop that rated their battery. The battery was supposed to last, according to the HP, something like 12 hours. And he never had anything past 5 hours using it. So he kind of, in his review, kind of said, well, never had more than 5 hours. And I tried everything to make sure that, it's the best. And HP came back with kind of a little rant at him saying, well, in our labs, this lasts 12 hours. And he just replied back, maybe in your labs, it's 12 hours, but in the real world, when you use it, it's 5. So your labs, I don't know how to use it and what they do, but obviously it's not real world experience. And there's a lot of that. Even when we talk about filters, a great example in the past, a lot of you'd buy a desktop and they would throw numbers at you with, oh, well, this radio comes with a 5.7 kilohertz, AM filter and a 2.8 kilohertz SSB filter. And they'd throw numbers at you, but then you'd finally notice when you use it, those filters are wider than what you say. They're not that great, actually. So I can tell you, the numbers are kind of a joke. Current series, they built the DX100 when cycle was at its peak. Yeah, well, it's not just a question of a cycle. I think it's also a question of there were so many stations back then that the radio just got tons of signals anyway. So there's an EAM message. 4724 upper sideband. Jeff King from Jacksonville, Florida. Nice to have you here. John Beck, I'm considering purchasing the XAsia Data D368 that you can get for as low as $24. Wow. The problem with these radios and a lot of the XAsia Data, the Reticus, you got to be careful. A lot of these radios have this weird frequency range on shortwave, and they all start at 6 megahertz up to 18. And I find that so weird because there's a lot of stuff below 6 that you want to tune. Dallas, nice to have you on board. Danielle, nice to have you here. First time here, Dallas. Cool. Welcome aboard, my friend. Richard, nice to have you on board from Branson, Missouri. Danny, shortwave 750 was my first radio back in the shortwave in 2015, and I didn't notice that band was wide. I thought it was my OCD driving me nuts. Storms, Radios, and Cats, nice to have you on board. Kurt Lewis, nice to have you here from Colorado. Dallas is in Manchester, Tennessee, KK4 ISW. Nice to have you on board. Zenfaro's FRG7 has an infamous wide bandwidth filter. It has been referred to by some as a barn door. Nice for program listening for isolated signals, but the narrow filter gets almost to serious work. Yeah. Richard Busby from Chicagoland. Coming down. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Matt, about the raccoons. I knew there were raccoons in the area because I'd seen one, I think last year. I saw one not far from here. But now it's actually coming on the balcony up here, so I kind of don't like that. What else do we have? John Beckham, nice to have you here. 5025 has been coming in very loud lately in Northeast Florida. Cool. Jean-François Trudel, bonjour et bienvenue de Saint-Hubert. Nice to have you here from South Shore. Fabio, nice to have you here from Brazil. PU7WAR. James M. Missed the last one, 2 of these, but I remembered to tune in tonight. Cool. Welcome aboard. Jason McIntyre. Nice to have you here from the West Midlands, UK. VE2FGJ, nice to have you on board. I like your review of the Elite 750. Honest review. Yeah. Oh, for sure, Simon Templar. All radios have room for improvement. Even the big $1,000, AM transceivers. There are things that are driving you nuts, and there are great things. Pretty crazy. John Beckham, shortwave always offers the element of surprise, like a great distance from you and the listener and the shortwave broadcaster. Yeah. Plus, there's a lot of utilities of all kinds and all sorts of stuff that you can tune. What else do we have? Oh yeah, RGDA Dakota. There are some broadcasters on the internet, definitely, but the major broadcasters, a lot of them are on the internet. The big ones that have like these extensive networks, a little bit like Radio New Zealand. But most of the smaller broadcasters, a lot of them don't have anything on the internet that is shortwave related to that the type of broadcast we're looking at. And once again, when you look at broadcasts, I talk a lot about if the internet was a deal breaker. Well, why is Radio Netherlands not on the internet? They just stopped everything. The internet was not an interesting thing. Software Radio Passion, Shortwave Radio Passion says, after a bit of waiting and queuing, I'm about to finally receive the original DSP2 Malahite. I think that in a portable, it can make me have fun. And so, yeah, absolutely. Chris, K1ZBX, nice to have you here in Massachusetts. Jim Gordon, did I recently see an ad for a new edition of the Ethon Satellite Executive with HD color display? Yep, it's supposed to come out in December. Now, I'm wondering what that's going to be like, because with the fiasco of the Satellite HD, better come out right from the start, because but what I heard is it possibly could be available around December. That could be interesting. I'm going to look at it definitely and try to see if maybe I could get one eventually. The color display I've seen, if it's like that, is very beautiful, I gotta say. Mike Water from Connecticut. Nice to have you here, Mike. What are your views on DGJIT's radio communication regarding SWR? Well, if you're talking about SWR, about a standing wave, it's really just a transmission thing. It's got to match, but I don't know exactly what you would like to know more, Francis, about that. Christian Marcoux asked you 2 weeks ago which SDR should get, and you mentioned SDR Play. I didn't catch which model. For easy install, does it catch all frequencies the MLA30 can capture? So the basic model is the RSP1A. So that's the start model, the one that it is great. It gets everything. It starts on the bottom of the long wave range, and it's continuous up to 2,000 megahertz. So you can even use it VHF, UHF listening. So yeah, the MLA30 is gonna be it's gonna get everything the MLA30 can, but you will need also another antenna if you plan to do VHF, UHF. Matter the Extra remembers the coup listening to BBC World Service reports in 91. John Beckham remembers Free Radio Free Europe and Voice of America back in the days of Radio Moscow. Keegan the Extra saw the CBS News reports on YouTube from that time relating to the situation. Greg, thinking of getting SDR play. You're going to have a lot of fun with that. Then Shortwave ran into Mikhail Gorbachev, last USSR president, at a book signing back in 95 in New York City. Wow, that's cool. Romnes says, thank you so much for answering my question. I understand. Cool AM Radio, nice to have you here, Andre. Chastank, nice to have you on board from Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah, TB Rogers Telecom highlighted the dependency on smartphones. Absolutely. Shane, Parks on the Air is now a daily or weekly occurrence in setting up temporary stations. My club meets up every Thursday evening in a different park and setup. I hope you take the time to explain also to people that come around what you guys are all about, and not just, kind of, always bring up the aspect of how you could, with those setups in the parks like that you could set up anywhere and be useful in emergencies. Big R7769 making Nikola Tesla antenna. Let's just check. Bernie, nice to have you here from San Diego, KD1BD. Yeah, exactly. I talk about a radio. I'm not insulting anybody. I'm just talking about a radio. John Beckham has fond memories of CB days back in the early 70s. Yep. What else do we have? Let me just try to catch up. Keegan DXer, most CB I've heard as late were on channel 6 saying bye. Yep, that happens so often. Any shortwave HP Arable product. I have 2 HP notebooks, both have just a black screen of that. Don't get me started on HP. I never bought an HP laptop. I've had an HP desktop in the past, which was fine. But in the laptops, all I had over time was Toshiba. And now for the first time ever, I have an Asus gaming laptop, and I got an Asus Chromebook, actually, which I do love. Keegan DXer, I used one of the HP laptops for my AM radio station, Radio Keegan. 670 AM, and now also 102.3 FM. Cool. Zenfaros, biggest flaw of H501X. I still can't figure out how to calibrate SSB. It's very easy, Zenfaros. To calibrate single sideband, put yourself on a station is really precise. Preferably WWV, and just follow the instructions. I have a video on the channel. You just tune in single sideband until what you hear on AM, the tone you hear on AM on WWV and the tone you hear when you put yourself in upper sideband sounds pretty much the same. When there's almost no difference or no difference at all in the audio between switching from AM to upper sideband, you press that upper sideband button and you hold it until the display, it will show at the top that it's going to blink twice. The back, the back screen lighting, and it's going to show a number, which is the number of offset that it's set itself, and you'll be tuned to for a single sideband. You're going to be calibrated. It's quite easy. And you'll have to do it regularly, because these radios, I mean, we're asking, and that's a common um, uh, question. People are on the impression that the on the impression that it's not normal that I use it 3 days later and I have to calibrate it again. Yeah, it's normal. You're asking a precision of 10 hertz on a radio that is, 200-300 bucks. I mean, these are radios in the thousands even have a problem with being very precise. So, it's normal that you recalibrate regularly. So we have DXing Slovenia. Nice to have you on board. St. Pharaoh's, satellite 800 millennium is not insensitive on the external loop. H51X is the same antenna is sensitive. Would recommend anyone considering between the two to get the H501X. What else we have? All India Radio coming on 7380, even with Radio Romania next door to it. Wow. Pretty cool. I61, nice to have you here. I want that radio, the current elite executive. King and the X are thinking getting the HD version of the Ethon executive with SSB. DXing Slovenia. I got my St. Jean ATS 99 X2 back from the Netherlands. It came as broken as I sent it in, even if it's from March batch. After complaining to St. Jean again, they said they cannot fix the noise. So I guess St. Jean ATS 909 X2 will always have its problems, since fixing it is impossible. What I see, because there's a lot of variations on the comments that I see on the ATS 909 X2. Mine, which is right here next to me, actually, works decently well, except for a few flaws that I talked about. But when I hear what some people are complaining of low audio and single sideband or lower sideband, which is not, yes, the audio is lower, but it's not a flaw for me. And I don't know what exactly they mean by the audio is low. Is it low to a point that is too low to listen to? Because I mean, every radio is pretty much like that. Single sideband often sounds a little less loud because often the narrow filter kicks in. But I don't, I'd like to see one that actually somebody, complains about that, what it actually sounds like. And so there's a few things like that are that I don't know. I don't know what to say. And so if it's the case, maybe it has some it could be some flaw in the quality control of the radios when they get out. John Mickham, if I remember correctly, good SDR ratio would be 1.1 to 1. Yeah, pretty much. That's would be perfect. And you got to be. There was an excellent presentation by Skip that talked about SWR on transceivers and how of course, the better the better you have, the more of your signals getting out there. But in terms of today's receivers, even if they were, at an SWR of 2 to 1, they're still fine and capable of working. But yeah, you want to have technically want to have the best. You want to have the best ratio possible. Jeff King, Ethan has a lot of work to do on not only the new radio but quality controls issues of existing radios. Yeah, but that satellite HD is really tarnishing their reputation a lot. I mean, come on, you had 2 years to have that radio done right. It's unacceptable. John K6RXD, nice to have you here. Keegan DX, display on my Ethan Elite Executive has intermittent problems over a year after ordering from Amazon. Segments going out. Wow. And finally, it stopped working completely. No problem, Matt. Take care, my friends, and have fun with the family. Family comes first. Keegan DXer's got a Toshiba VCR. On sale, the PL330 is the benchmark and a wake-up call to other radio companies. You've been challenged. Definitely. I mean, a Texan PL330 is crazy. All it can do and how it performs for the price. It's definitely a great example of what you can do if you do things right. Greg, how much is the ICOM shortwave receiver? Well, it's not, you can't buy it new anymore, pretty much. It's been discontinued for a while. But back in 2008-ish, I purchased it for, I think it was something like 1,750 Canadian. No problem, Christian Marcoux. John Mikhail, anyone been receiving WWV lately? If so, what frequency? Thanks. I was just actually hearing it right now on 10 megahertz. If I put 10 megahertz at one, am I hearing it? Yep, that's 10. Let's try 25. Let's try 25. Let's try 20. A little bit on 20. 15 is not too bad. 10 is really good. Even 5,000 is pretty good. So I'm getting it on a lot of frequencies right now here. What else do we have? So okay, try calibrating now. I've done this several times already, and the problem is after the flashing stops, the radio immediately changes to the wrong frequency and forgets the calibration. That is weird. So you press, I can actually do it here, just to show live. So like that, maybe you'll get something that you missed or didn't do right. But if I take 501X from here, and do it live. So what we're going to do, So I'm going to put the external antenna on it right here. So I'll change that. Take this here. External antenna. Right here. I'm just going to show you live right now. Push this here. So I'm going to go. So just look at the radios right here. So if I tune 10,000, we hear the tone. Put myself in upper sideband, and the tone will be different. So I put it. So on 9999.96 sounds pretty much the same. So I press the upper sideband, hold it, flashes twice, and there you go. It goes right up to 10,000 kilohertz. So now it's calibrated. If I punch in 6754, you see it sounds perfect on the top. Oh, it's perfect. So that's the calibration. It's the same thing for the CountyCom GP7 SSB. It's the same thing for the Texan PL330. They all calibrate exactly in that same way. Tune and try it precisely. If that doesn't work, it's kind of weird that you're not getting the calibration. It's kind of weird. Shane says, yes, sir, we do. We act as ambassadors to the hobby and explain what we are doing. People find it impressive that a wire and a radio with a battery can communicate across the country. It's interesting to see the sudden realization of their face when they realize that it is possible the internet and cell phone infrastructure can collapse. Yep. Cool. That's cool. Keegan the X-ray is getting WWV on 5,000, 10,000, and WWVH on 15,000 on his Ethan Grundy Edition Field Beta. James M. My ATS 909X2 is very low volume in SSB. I have to crank it up nearly to max in order to hear it. Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, to solve the calibration problem, I think the high-end radio manufacturers should make the radio with GPS reference clock capability. Attach an active GPS antenna, let the radio calibrate itself. John Beckham, for some reason, WWV isn't making the trip to Florida. James says, I had to send mine in for service, though. Lost all reception on shortwave, medium wave, maybe more. Came back with the same low volume. So, that's kind of interesting. Daniel Mark, nice to have you here. With the issue with the Elite 750 regarding short and narrow band be improved by removing my Elite 750 from the loop antenna to its internal whip? Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, in a way, if you have a lot of strong stations, and especially for the overloading and stuff like that, yeah, of course, removing it from an external antenna does help if overload is a problem. In trying to pick up stations that are close together, it could somehow help if, of course, the signal are weaker, which means using it on the telescopic. But overall, whether you're on telescopic or not, honestly, I've had a lot of difficulty with really tuning in some stations that are more difficult to get. For example, 5925 around 03 UT from Voice of America from Botswana Relay, I believe. is close to 5935 WWCR, which is a monster signal here. I have to put the attenuator to the max and the RF gain turned down to minimum, and even then it's difficult. And so yeah, it depends on what where you're listening and what you're listening. In some signals there could be some improvement, in some depending on the band you are in. Yeah, experiment. I mean, you're gonna see. Shortwave radio passion. My 99X2 also has a lower volume, but acceptable in LSB. But connecting it to the power supply is more than good. Honestly, don't want to send it to service just for this. Bonsoir TVDXer, fais attention à toi. The Xing Slovenia says, as I try to squeeze all the problems into it, I guess the problems that you mentioned as well are not fixable. Huh. Good series. Looking at the ICOM 705, what do you think of it? Looks interesting. From what I've seen, looks interesting. Definitely. Artist Crafter is curious. Does Ethon have any staff in North America, or are they entirely based in Asia? Really surprised that they have not come out with any apologies or social media outreach acknowledging the issues. Even worse, I've seen a lot of people say that they've sent emails to contact Ethon and never got replies back, which is kind of weird. Brian, nice to have you here. VA7 VEB from British Columbia. Very busy. Glad to catch the live stream tonight. Cool. Cool, John. The Xing Slovenia, I mean, everyone has its own problems, and it's really hard to squeeze them all into one video and also show people without boring them. Yeah, but then again, if you're a radio fan, you're not getting bored when people talk about either problems with a radio or something. Says Farrells, okay, today the H501X SSB calibration did something. It didn't forget the calibration, but it still has to be tuned 1 kilohertz higher than the actual frequency. Okay, you've got to go in several steps then, because your calibration, your radio is very far out, which means what I would do is go out of the range by maybe 300 or 400 hertz and do a fake calibration there to try to narrow down the gap that you have, that is 1 kilohertz. I've had a few people mention this and that were able to fix it, but when the difference in the calibration is more than 1 kilohertz, you have to do it in several steps to bring it back close to the frequency you're tuned. Marvin Motz, nice to have you here from the Japan Islands. James M, getting WWV now in mid-Atlantic region of the US. CHU signal stronger for me now. Ethan being eaten for dinner. Yep, pretty much. 6930 upper sideband anywhere. 6930. Yeah, there's something on 6930. Definitely. I hear something. Bonsoir, Christian. Edward, I'm close to pulling the trigger on the St. Jean ATS 909X2 for my first shortwave radio. Should I do it? Or what would you recommend under 400? The problem is if you if you get a good one, because you've just seen that some people are complaining about it. Some have low audio on the lower sideband. My main complaint here is that it has FM breakthrough everywhere. If you live near FM radio stations that are powerful, I would not purchase the Sangean ATS 909X2. It is slightly off frequency, and there's nothing you can do to fix it. There's no calibration. But it's still, I still put it in my top 10 because it's still a good enough rig. So, I would look, it depends on if you want to have the airband or not. If the airband is important to you, well, yeah, you've got a good radio with airband there. But I would look more into maybe a Texan PL990X or Texan H501X, which in my opinion are better radios than the Sangean ATS receiver. They'll be $100 less than 400. The H501X is $298, I believe. The 990X is $235. I would look more into that. So, Zenfaros, the first set was off by 1.2. When I tried to recalibrate it, it could only get about 0.99. Yeah, because the calibration cannot go more than 1 kilohertz at a time. So what I've seen from one person is you calibrate it, but 500 hertz. And then it's going to still be off, but off by less than a kilohertz. And then you'll be able to go and catch that difference and calibrate it properly. But that's only one person that actually I've read that says it was successful in doing like that. Mine not being, and my radio's never been more than a 20 or 30 hertz off, or even 100 hertz off. Of course, I don't have that problem. I would have to actually try and try and maybe create the problem on mine to see if we can uncreate the problem, which apparently you can, but in several steps. You have to do it several steps. So you tune it 500 hertz, for example, calibrate. Just do a fake calibrate. It won't match anything. So you can't. I've tried and it doesn't work. I thought it was off by 1.25. Then maybe there's a problem with yours to be off as much as that. Say, just try something for me while we're doing the live show. So, okay, I'm gonna show you something. So you say yours is 1 kilohertz off. What you're gonna do, because I'm just curious to see what you're gonna get. So if you just tune it, fine tune it, 500 kilohertz. Okay, don't listen to anything. Just tune it 5. If you're 1 kilohertz above, then tune it down. Tune it down, say 500. And then press the USB and hold to calibrate. Now I should be off by 500, and I'm going to listen to it to see. Oh, you're right. Oh, it doesn't let you do more than a certain amount. That is interesting. So if I put the M. Okay, I get where it doesn't work, because I had never tried that. It doesn't let you calibrate beyond a certain range. I get it. So, yeah. Okay, that's a bummer. So either you send it back if you're still in the possibility of doing it, or live with like me on the Texan PL 680. Live with the fact that it's off by. It's kind of interesting. I'm gonna check it out. See, I'm gonna try stuff on mine to see what can be done. It would seem now that the reason you're stuck there is because the calibration, the calibration is limited in how off it is. Stephen Wood, 20 meters is very noisy and only a few weak signals. Did manage to work California and Dominican Republic from Cape Cod. John Beckham, beware of the Prince J401. It's prone to having a volume control wheel to break off. So, S. Patrick, 1964. Not a good week for Ethan, that's for sure. Joel Bundy, nice to have you here from sunny Virginia Beach. Nice to have you here. Take care, Bruce, 73. John Jones, X501X, best radio on the market now. Pretty much. Except you get mad when it's 1 kilohertz off, like our friend here. Take care, Storms, Raising Cuts. Daniel and Mark, two of my best radios are both under one loop antenna, and I have a switch box to move from one another. Can I use my 2-position coaxial switch for 4 radios if I use 2 splitter cables? If you just use splitters, it's not the best because there could be an interaction between the radios, but depends on the radios. Some radios don't have interactions between each other, some will. But you can try it. Take care, DXing Slovenia. Good night. Patrick, St. James seems to be in competition against itself with their high-end radios. Yeah. James, I haven't noticed FM breakthrough on my ATS 909X2, and I'm near a major city that should have at least some strong FM transmitters. You might just don't listen to where it happens, though. Yeah, because here it's FM breakthrough capital where I live. And it has breakthrough on certain bands. For example, I won't be able to listen on the 41 meter band much with the telescopic antenna. The air band is completely washed out. It's impossible to listen to. The only way that I can actually listen to shortwave correctly is with the MLA30. When I put the MLA30 outdoor antenna on it, because it's not sensitive to FM frequencies, to the VHF range, now that works great. But on the telescopic over it, I've got tons of FM breakthrough. Maze Man, nice to thank you so much for the tip. The Mad Radio DX recommends the XH Data D808. The only negative, the real big negative to D808 is the muting when you tune around. If you like tuning around with the tuning knob, that'll be an annoying thing for you. But for the rest, definitely a great radio and not very expensive. The Rorex, nice to have you here, says, what SDR software is your favorite for the RSP1A? I use SDR Uno, which I love. So yours is really off. That's sad. Rick, nice to have you here from Milwaukee. Mad Reader DXer, yeah, there's nothing they can do about it. And it's, it's not, because it's what's sad is that, Texan has calibration that you can do, even on a Texan PL330. So it's sad that St. Gian didn't implement something like that. It's not off enough for me to go crazy on the St. Gian 909X2, but there are things that we hate on radios, that when the radios are like a certain way. For me, frequency precision is super important on a receiver, especially when the receiver gives me a very precise frequency readout. Better be close, because I find it annoying. But I've learned to live with it. I've learned to live with it on the St. Gian. Ron says, my MLA 30 plus, I bring it outdoors here and there, but I am enjoying the indoor performance, waiting for winter. Bring it on. RG Dakota, I both have the D808, Texan PL330, and both seem to work well together. Each has different bandwidths and characteristics. Yep. So you're out of the period to return it, Zenfaros. Have been nice to have known this earlier, since I noticed it immediately, but now other people will notice. So I'll bring it up in one of my videos when we talk about it. Actually, when I do my video on the bad things of the radios I love, I'll actually mention that it's a possibility, and if you notice that, to return it. And Frank Ireland, yeah. If you go to the Ethon website, they let you buy it. Absolutely, they let you buy it. It's all the dealers and the stores that stopped selling it. Mark Fisher from Southern Illinois, nice to have you here. Daniel Mark, thank you for your fabulous feedback. Thank you, 73 man. Take care. James M, thank you for the info. I can pick up shortwave and airband with just a built-in whip antenna, so I guess the breakthrough isn't a big issue with my specific. Yeah, and it might have to do with, because that's something that you have to think also, is that it might have to do with a FM broadcaster, it not just being strong, but being on a very precise FM frequency that is bothering the radio, because it could be some effect of one of the stations. I actually never took the time to scan the FM band and compare the FM breakthrough kind of wobbly talk with something on the FM band, so I can pinpoint what station exactly is doing it. So it could be a mix of, they're not as strong as they are here, because I'm not that far from the broadcast antenna on Mont Royal here, where almost every FM station is broadcasting from. But it also could be because of one specific station on a frequency in the FM band also. Spatrick, when's the last time St. Gian put out the new radio? Well, it's the ATS 909X2. And I guess, man, what has it been now? 2-3 years? How long? When did the 909X2 come out? Forget. Ken Herring, have a Grundy Yardboy 400 PE. Just got a Texan PL600. Discovered your channel on YouTube. Watch many of your videos. Eager to learn. Cool. 2 great radios. I used to have a Yardboy 400 in the 90s. Dan, nice to have you here from Ohio, and 8WJZ. King and DX, my local FM stations are between 4 and 30 miles away from me. At Tropo or Skip come through their frequencies occasionally, on a few at least. So I'm down the Skip Wave DX, check this PL330, right on the money. Spatrick AM bands are starting to really open up and dusk and dawn now as the DXing season is beginning. Yep. Papa Krampus, nice to have you here. Joel's performed detailed tests on both. Thanks for your diligence to the hobby, Joel. Yep. James, I think the ATS 909X2 became available in early 2021, so around a year and a half ago. Yeah, I'm trying to remember when it came. It's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. And I was trying to figure out if it was during the pandemic. And so, yeah, it could be something like a year and a half or 2 years ago. Yeah. Ron says, my only gripe with the PL330 is the weak tuning knob assembly. When needed, it will be fixed by a tech. So, okay, you have a problem with yours? You know, the biggest problem I think with the radios today, especially when they're lower priced, plastic parts used everywhere, and plastic, well, has its major flaws of not being um, that solid sometimes. So, hey guys, we had the passing of a um, a well-known and um, last guy that was at the top of the USSR. I don't remember how they called him, but the first chief of the Communist Party or something like that. So the last USSR guru that was Mikhail Gorbachev, died at 91. And it's interesting because in the USSR, he's like not really liked. He was hated a lot because a lot of people had the impression that he killed the big, powerful USSR state. General Secretary, thank you guys. General Secretary, that's the exact word. And so that's weird. Mine doesn't seem flimsy. When you say flimsy, what does it move, or because if it's just because it skips, it's more the encoder inside than the tuning knob itself. But anyways, so the general secretary, of course, of the USSR, like I said, it was he's not liked. He was not liked because a lot of people had the impression that the powerful Soviet Empire was, it's his fault if it disappeared. And unfortunately, and he's been liked in the West a lot, particularly for one major reason, and it was the fact that it was the fact that the when the Soviet satellite states and all the countries that were under the empire, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and all of that, even when the Berlin Wall fell, he just told everybody, you know what, don't do anything. And I think a lot of people are crazy about the about that. They're not crazy about the fact that he, instead of using his power to keep all of those states there, he just let go and said, you know what, maybe it's time for it to go. There's an interesting article that I read this week where it was not actually his intention to have the USSR break apart. His intention was to keep it as the USSR, but to push it into a new era where it would be better and more relaxed, and all the perestroika and the glasnost stuff. But that's not what happened. So of course, and everything went pretty fast after that. I mean, and well, today's Russia is today's Russia. Let's just say. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Cold War era. A little. Skip, nice to have you here in 2EI. Pepper Krampus, use of the MLA30 external antenna on portables opens their ears on shortwave bands considerably. Beats the internal whip hands down. Also use a C crane Justice antenna for medium wave AM band. Cool. And yep, the SSR became very bad off. Absolutely. It was a big, it was a shock. Definitely a shock. Al, I have the Grandic Satellite 750 from 10 years and I don't have too much trouble wideband filter. It's too bad you have so much trouble with the Ethon 750. No, quality didn't decline, Al. Yours is exactly. I've seen one guy talk about it, reviewed 3 units. The Grundig official version from the first, the Texan version, and the Ethon version from now. They're all exactly the same. I think when people don't notice too much the wideband problem is because maybe of the type of listening they do. Because I'm trying to figure out why some people don't, really, it doesn't bother them that much. So, but yours is exactly has the exact same problems. It's all by 3 kilohertz, all of that. But probably the type of listening maybe you do you don't notice it that much. Gamma Centauri, nice to have you here. Yeah, well, Ron, you can't compare it to the 990, which has metal knobs. You'll never. But I bet you that it's still going to be good and rocking in years from now, even though it's plastic. Mario DX, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the former USSR states wanted to break away from the USSR at the time. Otherwise, they would have wanted to stay with them. Oh, absolutely. There was definitely they wanted to leave. Especially all the countries attached. The Czechoslovakia and all of that. There's always been, back in the days, there's always been in most of the countries that were attached to the Soviet bloc, a want and a willing to get away, but they couldn't. It was just, they were severely. Look at Czechoslovakia, how they suffered when they tried to change. They got Soviet tanks coming in, and it's like, nope, you are staying here, and that's it. So Danny Shortwave, John Bacon, yep, USSR, which was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, and definitely. Danny Shortwave was exciting times back then when the USSR collapsed, ending up with reunification of Germany, which was cool to watch. Definitely. And so, prior to all of that, hey, Fastload, nice to have you here. So prior to all of that, you have the Cold War times. There were in the 80s, there were a succession of several of those general secretaries that didn't last very long because they were just too old and it died quickly. And that ended up with Mikhail Gorbachev back then. And it's my first time that I realized really a lot about communism, the Cold War, and all of that probably is in the late 70s when I was, as I was getting close to my teenage years, and you start realizing a little more about the world around you. You guys in the US that are older than me, of course, you guys remember the drills. There were drills for you guys for nuclear attacks and stuff like that, which I don't know if there was here. And I don't know if anybody can answer that question because we have the duck and cover videos that are like a joke today, but you guys had all the drills and everything. And I would like to know if there were some drills ever done in Canadian schools. I really wonder. Chest tank, when USSR fell in Berlin Wall came down. Folks don't realize how scary it really was. Went from a known enemy to who is who. It was a time of discovery, knowing what was happening. But I think, in fairness, for most of the people, rather than being scary, it looked more like a it looked more like a positive thing, and that maybe good times are ahead, or better times at least. So yeah, the Warsaw Pact, absolutely. Jeffrey Naylor, I remember Radio Moscow in 1984. My Eat Kit Shortwave 717 and Radio Shack Shortwave 75 feet wire antenna. Yeah, the Canada-Russia hockey game. That was a turning point. Matter of the X, I think Gorbachev calmed down the nuclear scare of Russia back in the 80s, which inspired the Two Tribes video by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Yeah, I still remember that video being banned in many places. Many places didn't play Two Tribes. I remember seeing that video for the first time here on, I think it was on Much Music, and thinking, wow, this video is crazy. As you know, for those that don't know, that video, Two Tribes, represents, what was it, Reagan and I think it was Chernenko, because it was not in the era of Gorbachev yet. And they're in an arena, and they are battling them, like it's like a boxing ring, and they're just, and everything is permitted. I mean, one will bite the ear off of the other president, and so on. It was completely nuts. The video was kind of violent in a way, and represented, the general secretary of the USSR against Ronald Reagan. And but I think it was Chernenko, if I'm not mistaken. That's the one that's represented in the Two Tribes video. Which are crazy. But that was banned in so many places. They didn't want to play that. I just out of Crafter's Kitchen. Gorbachev was almost assassinated when coup plotters kidnapped, and it could have triggered World War III. Don't Call Me Shirley. 1991 was probably one of the most amazing years to be tuning to shortwave bands. Radio Kuwait, military comms, the Gulf War, Radio Moscow, the final days of the Soviet Union, Craig, KC2 ASB. It was very interesting. Very interesting, but of everything that kind of happened at the same time. For a long time, we had so much. It was so much kind of a stable thing. We were in the Cold War fright, the Cold War. The 80s had one of the bad Cold War moments. I mean, the Cold War, when it started and until the 80s and ended in the late 80s, it had ups and downs. There were times when it was kind of relaxed, and there were times when it was kind of heavy. My part in the 80s was kind of heavy. So it it was in demonstration of how scary it could be at times, when these two big nations are against each other, and it was crazy. So man, and that, of course, the Gulf War, invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, and all of that. Apparently, some people heard some really interesting stuff from Radio Kuwait as the Iraqi army was going through Kuwait City. Yeah, Sting song. That is the perfect song. That Sting song, Russians, is, if you want to have a demonstration of a song that has captured the essence of the craziness of the Cold War, I think Russians by Sting is really good. Really good. Tibiasowski, after 89, when USSR and Russia withdrew its support to Cuba, we went into the New World Order and Cuba became poorer, but still hanging on. Yep. You know, we have a few relics. We can call them relics of those days. I mean, China radio does not represent the Cold War and things of the past. Radio Peking did. Radio Beijing did. What really is left behind that still sounds and has some feel to it, because they Radio Havana, Cuba, and but particularly the Voice of Korea from North Korea. That sounds like a good old communist station from the 70s or 80s, basically. John Beckham, powerful Radio Moscow transmitters were really loud back in the days of the Cold War. Remember the radio jammers in an attempt to squelch the truth? Yep. There's a lot of those jammers, too. Les Hemmings, remember Voice of Russia on shortwave suddenly putting out military marching music with occasional breaks, and then voice would say, Gorbachev is resting in his countryside. VE3FAL, nice to have you here, Fred. My Radio Shack Globe Patrol kit I built brought the world to me. Still have the radio, sure miss the old days of real radio and AM radio stations. Fred Water, 82 to 85. The joke was Vice President George H.W. Bush had season tickets to the Soviet funerals, 3 in 3 years. Yeah, that was the part when they were all dying really quickly. And, there was always that unknown. I don't know if you guys felt that, but I remember in the 80s, every time a general secretary of the USSR was dying, there's that little moment of, what's going to be next? What's going to happen next? Because they weren't all equal. Some were crazier than others. So you're always kind of wondering, okay, who's the next guy going to be there? He's going to want to play the tough guy or not? Dave says, I'm old enough to remember Khrushchev. We will bury you. And him banging his shoe on a lectern in the UN. Cuban Missile Crisis. Yep. Mad Radio. Yeah, Konstantin Chernenko. Had to look it up as was too young to remember. Do you remember Gorbachev better as a... do you remember Gorbachev better as a kid too? Yeah. My first... Who was the prime minister in 79? The general secretary in 79, 80-ish. I forgot his name. That's the first general secretary that I can kind of relate, really understanding that he was that he was a guy from the USSR. Yeah, Reagan, the Star Wars stuff. Which was a real joke in a sense. And I mean, in Brezhnev, I think it's Brezhnev. It could be Brezhnev. Yeah, it's totally possible that it's Brezhnev. Yeah, that's it, Brezhnev. In 19, I mean, we had some technology, but in 1984, a Star Wars concept of war was such a advanced thing that we didn't have the technology at all to build anything like that at that time. Of course, it's always looking into the future for those stuff. Chastank. Recall Brezhnev as General Secretary, then Andropov, then Chernenko, and then Gorbachev. So these are pretty much the ones that I've lived with and remember. Yeah, Russians was released in 85. It's on the album, the first solo album, Dream of the Blue Turtles, which I love. It's a great album. Khrushchev. Yeah. Jeff King was born in 61. By age 8, 9, I was fully aware of the USSR. We all were taught. So when I discovered shortwave radio, I knew when the wall fell, a whole new era. None knew what would happen. Don't call me Shirley. 1983 was one of the most heavy years. The shooting down of the Korean airliner. Yeah, that was a big story. I remember that. That was a really big story. I can tell you that. Man, that was crazy. Andrea the Exter, Voice of Korea sounds like Radio Tirana of the Iron Curtain. Yep, pretty much. There's Crafter's Kitchen, remembers Radio Moscow. Uncle Justin, another song, Modern Day Cowboy by Tesla. Bob, WA2SQQ, the Radio Peking, would send a copy of Mao's Red Bible. Yeah, absolutely. Marvin Motz became an avid shortwave listener, listening to Radio Free Prague prior to the Russian invasion. North Korean is still the same and funny. Yeah. Ron, is shortwave broadcasting expensive? Example by hour slot. The shortwave broadcasting. So it depends what you mean by shortwave broadcasting and what. So if you want to have a program on the air, it depends on the broadcaster. Broadcaster like WBCQ is around something like $35 to $40 an hour, and even less sometimes. WRMI is in the $60 range ish for an hour. But when we talk about, because this is also something that we talk about a lot in the in the general shortwave broadcasting side, it's the fact that it's not expensive in the sense of the country's budget, but shortwave broadcasting, especially like it was done when there were dozens of transmitters pumping out 500 kilowatts all the time, does cost a lot to maintain. You need a staff, you need an engineer. So yeah, definitely there's some cost to it. Yeah, Windows of Change, pretty a very beautiful song that also is very, very good at expressing the excitement and the feel of the moment of the Berlin Wall falling down. V3 FAL, the Falkland Islands War. Yep. That was something else also. Yep. So let's listen to a couple of clips. How about that, guys? 1040 Nord, my opinion on Ethan Field Radio for FM. I've got the Eton Field BT radio here, and it seems pretty good on FM, honestly. It does seem really good. To be says, to be honest, most 80s and 90s were 90% political or religious. What else do we have? Dr. Sisop, nice to have you here. Yeah, 99 Left Balloons by Nina. Oh, of course. Yeah, there's another representation of the hype of the time. Midnight in Moscow, yes. So let's go to some interesting stuff. Let's do this. Let's find some radio. Let's see here if there's some historical stuff that could be of interest. So what do we have here? Oh, I see Leonid Brezhnev from the time. Wow. Okay, let's see here. What do we have? Have a Radio Moscow. Shortwave. I'm trying to find a very specific broadcast that could be of interest here. So Radio Moscow. So this one is from December the 3rd, 1978. Oops. Wrong device.
Here's the bridge you are building, says the first pilot. Viktor Roscoe speaking to two passengers of his helicopter, Noy Indovong and Vladimir Zhuravlev. In a few hours,
sure sounds like Radio Moscow.
It's a bridge that has been built.
You hear the woodpecker?
Later, there was a big meeting. The crowd shouted hooray to the evolution.
That's great, the woodpecker interfering with its sound broadcast.
In their special way to the 3rd anniversary of the People's Democratic Republic of Laos, having finished months ahead of time the work on the bridge. Traffic has now opened on the highway bridge in Hua-Phan province. A bridge of friendship. This is how it was referred to in Laos since the work began.
The
bridge stands on the legendary Highway 6.
Oh yeah, Pussy Riot is the modern day
to the liberated areas.
The modern day.
When there were heavy tropical rains, the Neon River rose and the communication between its banks stopped. The first group of construction workers arrived at the project in March 1977.
And let's check here. So that's Midnight in Moscow. But this one is going to be, I believe, getting into broadcasts. Let's just see. Yeah, there we go. So you guys remember, this is how after Midnight in Moscow it would go. You would hear the Kremlin chimes.
Radio Moscow World Service presents Music Non-Stop. You'll now hear the Melodia Group under Georgi Garanyan, the Polish Radio Orchestra, the Siegfried May Variety Orchestra of the German Democratic Republic, and others.
What else do we have? Here is... So here's Radio Moscow. End of coup attempt, August 22nd, 1991.
This is the North American service of Radio Moscow. At 03 hours UTC, we'll continue broadcasting in the 13, 16, 19, 22, 25, and 41-meter band short waves. That's the North American service of Radio Moscow in the 13, 16, 19, 22, 25, and 41-meter band short waves. Please stand by for the news and other features.
Every time I hear, the full announcements like that, Moscow, midnight in Moscow, and the chimes, and then the news, it brings you back to the good old days. Yeah, Dr. Sisop, Radio Vanik Cuba has been having some good audio in the past, at least the past couple of weeks. Yeah, Two Tribes, Don't Call Me Shirley. That was something. The video of that song. Skip, yep, Radio Moscow, a jazz show. There. That was a great one. Sergeant Rock, nice to have you on board from Hawaii. Civilian defense markings on AM tuning. Yep, radios had those. Absolutely. And here they are again. So this is supposed to talk about the end of the coup attempt, August 22nd, 1991.
This is the World Service of Radio Moscow. The news read by Karl Yegorov. First, the headlines. President Gorbachev has declared that he is in full control of the situation and that communications broken off as a result of adventurous actions by a group of officials have been restored. Foreign Minister Alexander Besmertnik has declared that the Soviet foreign policy strategy remains unchanged. And Soviet-Sino consultations focusing on Mid-Eastern problems have started in Beijing. Those are the headlines, and now here is the news in detail. President Mikhail Gorbachev has declared that he is in full control of the situation and that communications with the country, broken as a result of the adventurous actions by a group of officials, have been restored. Mr. Gorbachev said he had telephone conversations with the presidents of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, the Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, Belarus, Nikolai Deminty, and Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov. All of them denounced the attempted coup, stopped through the resolute actions of the democratic forces. The leaders of the republics announced that the anti-constitutional steps were not supported by either the supreme government bodies or the people of their republics. Mr. Gorbachev gave instructions to the chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, Mikhail Moiseev, to withdraw all forces to their barracks and home bases, and in future to follow orders only from the Soviet president.
Well, that was a piece of history here that is on YouTube. Some interesting stuff that you can listen to. It's pretty crazy. There's a lot of the satellite states. There was, of course, Radio Berlin from the east. Radio Berlin International. This is from June 2nd, 1989. 9730 kilohertz. Received in Philadelphia, USA. Oh yeah, the day after, that was something.
Newscast comes to you from Radio Berlin International, the voice of the German Democratic Republic. The General Secretary of the Women's International Democratic Federation, Miriam Vieira-Tuominen, has demanded the immediate quashing of the death sentences against 14 black South Africans. The 14, who belong to the group of the Uppington 25, should be released immediately and unconditionally, like all other political prisoners who are threatened with death sentences, she said in an interview for GDR Radio. Millions of women all over the world are highly indignant at the state terrorism and the crimes by the ruling minority in South Africa, Miri via to Armenian added.
Hey, Rob.
The Israeli occupation authorities in the Gaza Strip have begun to issue identity cards to the Palestinians working in Israel. At the moment, 50,000 Arabs are affected. These measures are to be extended step by step to the other occupied territories. The introduction of identity.
There was one of the. Let me just go here. I'm going to try to find. Go. The Soviet states. When Poland later continued its transmission, it was actually much better and quieter. But remember in the USSR days when Poland was communist, we had Polish Radio Warsaw. And this one is from. Let me just go down here. Polish Radio Warsaw. 19. What's this one? This one is 2006. So this is more of a. It's more of a. Trying to see here. Which one has the interval signal? There's a fly in the studio that is annoying. So Polish Radio Warsaw, when try this one. This one is external service, Radio Polonia. This is that was the
Radio Polonia.
Those interval signals from their communist days, which was so harsh and
Radio Polonia.
Let's march together, and I don't know, it's just crazy.
Radio Polonia.
Of course, there was Radio Prague and Czechoslovakia with a interval signal that was called forward left.
This is Radio Prague, Czechoslovakia.
We also had, of course, there's the famous interval signal from Radio Tirana, Albania. That was also something back in the. I like this one. So this interval signal is called With a Pickaxe and a Rifle, and this one is interesting because you'll hear some Russian jamming over it. Just to give you an idea, you'll see what the jamming was all about. It was very brief here, but that was the type of white noise that you could hear. And once again, an interval signal that is extremely... And can you hear the hum? The hum of the transmitters that a lot of the Russian stations had back then.
This is Radio Tirana. This is Radio Tirana. Which means for broadcast in the English language.
Pretty crazy. Trying to take, what else do we have? We had Yugoslavia, which was on Romania, also in their communist days. So Yugoslavia and Radio Yugoslavia from 1980. External service of Radio Yugoslavia.
This is Radio Yugoslavia.
Pretty crazy. Yeah, Tio Ostrowski, you know what? What I was wondering about, like, YouTube in 30, 40 years. One of the things that crossed my mind is, someday when I'm not going to be here anymore, with all of these videos and all of my live shows, will there be some place where they'll still be available for everybody to enjoy after my passing, of maybe somebody in the future watching them and watching this crazy thing about radio and what it is all about? Maybe shortwave is going to become super popular and my videos are going to make so much money but I'll be dead. Who knows? Oh, God. So Romania was also, so we talked about Kiev. Let's go to Ukraine. There was, of course, Radio Ukraine. So Radio Kiev, but from the days, the external service that they had, external. So this is Radio Ukraine International and Ukrainian radio. I think this is more recent because there was Radio Kiev. Here, I think. Do we have it here? I don't see it here. That's interesting. Radio Kiev. Green Radio. Oh, here we have. There's a regional station. Radio Voice of Kiev. I remember there was a definite one for Radio Kiev. I don't find it. What's this one? Is this Ukrainian Radio World Service? But that I think is more recent. Yeah, that is recent. So about Romania, their interval signal back in the day. Romania, Radio Romania. From the year, this is Radio Bucharest. I forgot, but they were called Radio Bucharest. Radio Bucharest from 1985. Digital shortwave vault.
This is Bucharest.
Yeah, I don't believe, Dr. Sisop, I don't believe YouTube closes any accounts when they're not active. I've got some that I haven't done anything in 10 years, and they're still there. They don't seem to close any of the accounts. It's as if they're keeping them like some kind of, video archive or something. What else was there? I'm trying to remember. Because there was that time here of some might have heard this station here of Radio Grenada on shortwave. Oh, this is the one here. Radio Free Grenada.
This is Radio Grenada with studios and transmitters located at Montrouge, St. George's, Grenada.
And there's Radio Free.
Students located at Montrouge and St. George's, this is the voice of the revolution, Radio Free Grenada. The time is 10 o'clock.
And of course, we have, thank you for that, John Beckham. We have Radio Bulgaria. Radio Bulgaria. So this one is from, let's try to find one here. I've got Radio Sofia. Yeah, it was called Radio Sofia. I remember Radio Sofia. Now, this is Radio Bulgaria. That was later. Radio Sofia. This is old. Radio Sofia, 1964. Yeah. The Grenada clip is from 1983. Don't Call Me Shirley.
Burası Sofya.
Burası Sofya Radyosu.
The broadcast of CHU Canada. Radio CHU. Check here. Radio CHU. So these are frequencies. So something about a date here. Radio station CHU, operated by the NRC. Call letter CHU were first used for the Canadian time transmission in 1938 on the frequencies of 3330, 7335, which was changed to 7850 in 2009, and 14670. Before 1938, the call letters of essentially the same transmissions were VE9OB. The carrier frequency has been the specified standard since 1934. Before that, the coarse oscillators had been tuned to standard wavelengths. Continuous transmitters of transmissions at wavelength of 20.4 meters has started in 1933, joining the 40.8 meters and 90 meter transmissions, which began daytime only in 1929. And there are daily transmissions on a wavelength of 52.5 meter that began in 1928 with the call letters 9CC, later called VE9CC. So that's a little part of historical info here. I didn't even know that. I knew that it came from a long time, but the call letter CHU is 1938, but they've started in 1928 as with a different call sign. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Absolutely. The CHU for a long time was Eastern Standard Time. Definitely. Eastern Standard Time. And then they switched to UTC at some point, which was kind of the best thing to do. I mean, why use Eastern Standard Time? And especially in a country like Canada that's so big, where you have multiple time zones, there's a nonsense in using Eastern Standard Time. CHU is much better. What else do we have? I'm trying to think. So even in Russia, there were several stations. So there was, let me check here what there was. So for external, there was, or for other broadcasts, there was other things. St. Petersburg, I believe there was, let me check here. There was something called Radio Leningrad. Radio Leningrad. That was external service, 1980.
Говорит Ленинград. Говорит город Ленина.
There was also trying to find it here.
Начинаем передачу для моряков рыболовных и научных экспедиций. Для тех, кто в море.
I'm going to find it better here. You guys remember Station Peace and Progress? Peace and Progress, which was Peace. We would hear the interval signal. Radio Peace and Progress English service from Moscow, 1974. Miss San Minix. Wow. I definitely remember that. I always found that so odd as an interval signal.
This is radio station Peace and Progress. You are tuned to radio station Peace and Progress, broadcasting the voice of Soviet public opinion.
Wow.
This is radio station Peace and Progress, the voice of Soviet public opinion. You can hear our transmissions every day at 8, 9, 10:30, 13:30, 14:30, and 15:30 Greenwich Mean Time in the 13, 16, 19, 25, 31, 41, and
the number of
49
frequencies they were using back then was crazy. Hey, Brian, nice to have you here from Arizona. No, the Sandman X, the frequency of 7850 was the one changed in 2009. But from Eastern Standard Time to UTC, I don't remember when that was happening. But
first, as usual, a few items in the news today. Soviet President Mikhail has favored further moves to strengthen peace and international cooperation.
We have 1975 station HCJB. Japanese, okay. Let's see, English. This one is 75. I want this one. Spanish
Está en
English.
sintonía con HCJB La Voz de los Andes, transmitiendo desde Quito,
Rafael
capital
Rosa.
de la República del Ecuador, en la América del Sur.
This is the Voice of the Andes radio station HCJB, heralding Christ Jesus' blessings in 13 languages around the world from Quito, Ecuador in South America. For a copy of our international program schedule, write to HCJB, Box 691, Quito, Ecuador.
Stations. One interval signal that hasn't changed. And it was, I still remember, this brings me back in time because it's still the same today. And what today is KBS World Radio used to be called Radio Korea. And that would have been, imagine if Radio Korea would have stayed Radio Korea, because the North is calling themselves Voice of Korea today. They used to be called Radio Pyongyang. So I guess they changed to KBS when the North changed to Voice of Korea because they didn't want to be mixed. But Radio Korea, when I hear this interval signal, which is the same today, dang, it brings me back to my teenage years listening in the summer on 15575.
This is Radio Korea, the overseas service of the Korean broadcast.
On the Deuce, this first station I got a QSL card from.
라디오 한국 KBS 국제 방송입니다. 현재 서울입니다.
This is Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea. This is Radio Korea, the overseas service of the Korean broadcasting system, coming to you from Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea. And now I begin our 1-hour transmission.
This one everybody knows. From the Madagascar Relay.
Radio Nederland in Hilversum met een uitzending gerelayeerd via Tenerife, Madagaskar, bestemd voor het Midden-Oosten en het zuidelijk deel van Afrika. De golflengten 25,55 en 49,83 meter. Frequenties 11.740 en 6.020 kilohertz.
I think this one. There's this one, which the Bonaire relay, which I think is in English. Raphael, I remember hearing or getting a faint carrier of that Chesky station, Bolivia on 3310 last winter or the winter before.
With a relay transmission via Bonaire in the Netherlands and Antilles, directed to New Zealand on a frequency of 11,740 kilohertz and a wavelength of 25.58 meters.
And there's a lot of these things. There is, trying to check out here. When I started listening to shortwave in the 80s, Radio Taiwan was Voice of Free China. This is the name they had back then. So here is Voice of Free China from 1975.
You have been listening to This is Free China, a program transcribed from the Republic of China and designed to promote better international understanding. This is Free China is a presentation of the Voice of Free China, the international service of the Broadcasting Corporation of China.
Should be a great place, Sandman X, to get some good shortwave. Oh, yeah. Some of these definitely bring me back in the good old days. You guys remember when the interval signal of Spain? It's interesting because I have nowhere where I see Spanish foreign radio, but I remember Spain used to be called Spanish foreign radio at some point, and their interval signal was, I would guess maybe this one. Yeah. Do some of you remember when it was called Spanish foreign radio? Okay, VE3FAL. I don't know, because I don't see any reference anywhere. Maybe it was a very short period of time, but I'm pretty sure it was called Spanish foreign radio back then. And that was the interval signal. Luis also remembers the interval signal.
Radio Exterior de España. Emisión para Europa. Servicio español.
Man. Stations that we had back in the day. There was this one here. I have a QSL, very colorful QSL from, they were always off frequency slightly. So I don't know if some of you have this. It was from probably this one here, external from 19. This is 2011. Let me just check here. Yeah. This, Arabic, English, French. I don't see one that's what I want. Radio Jamahiriya. You guys remember that from Libya? Radio Jamahiriya. I got a QSL. Here I got Great Jamahiriya Radio. I don't know. They're on 11826. I remember that. They're off frequency always. Of course, the first night I listened to Shortwave, I heard this, which was it was one of the first stations I've heard, which was where is it? 1980, 1976. Here we go. They had an external service, and I remember the first night I heard them.
This is Israel broadcasting from Jerusalem. Good morning, everyone. The time is 7 o'clock, 5 hours Greenwich Mean Time.
Israel ditzin Jiddisch von Jerusalem. Shalom und a guten Abend alle unsere Zuhörer.
Called Israel, yeah. They had a broadcast to North America in the evening. What I just and you guys remember also Turkey had a different interval signal than today. Back in the 80s, Voice of Turkey interval signal is, I believe, is this the one? Because there's several. No, that's not the one. Foreign service. Then I think it's this one. That was the old interval signal I was used to for Voice of Turkey back in the day. Sandman, I wish I had a shortwave radio in the 80s, but then I'd probably be even more nerdy and reclusive than I'm already. Well, you know, I was a very... Mad Radio the Extra, yes, Maria became Voice of Africa at some point, absolutely. You're right about that. You know, I was very, very in my bubble back in the day. If you guys would have seen me as a teenage, you would have seen me pretty much as a very nerdy...
you are tuned to the Voice of Turkey broadcasting from
very nerdy and
our English language transmissions are on the air every day between
and kind of a loner. I had friends, but kind of a loner.
1055 kilohertz in the 49-meter band.
And of course, one that we can't not listen to, because this is always a pleasure to listen to. One of, in my opinion, the most beautiful interval signals that shortwave had. Oops. Not this one. Wait. Actually, it's better here. This one is better. Because there's a full broadcast here with the... what was probably their national anthem. Oh, this is a broadcast from 1980s. There's no specific. So here we go. Dr. Sisop, my clock is in UTC. It's always in UTC. I'm a shortwave guy. Clocks are in UTC here.
This is Radio RSA, the voice of South Africa from Johannesburg.
This news bulletin comes to you from Radio RSA. the external service of the South African Broadcasting Corporation.
Yeah, chest tank. Definitely.
The Supreme Court in the South African city of Port Elizabeth has annulled the government restriction order of a black activist.
Yes, I'm a nerd, and I'm happy Dr. Sisson to be a nerd.
The court accepted the defense argument.
So, hey, guys, I'm hearing my next-door neighbors that are getting into their bedroom, which is on the other side of this wall. So, we're going to end the show for tonight. And, of course, we'll end it in proper style
At the same time as Mr. Jack
with
has also appealed against his restriction. It is the third time in the last week that the South African
Moscow,
judiciary
midnight in
has
Moscow.
annulled government restrictions.
How about it?
Earlier, 16 people had their detention orders declared invalid by the Bloemfontein Supreme Court.
You have to end properly. So, here we go. So, anyways, no, neighbors don't complain never, but I'm out of respect. I prefer, because I'm talking quite loud when I do the live show. So for me, it's a respect to have. Simply, my neighbors here never have any problem, and even if I would continue an hour, they would never say anything. But for me, it's a respect to have with the neighbors. So take care, everybody. Thanks for being here. It was a nice show tonight. I've gone back in time a little bit because we also wanted to talk. I wanted to talk a little bit about, for some of us, it's a time where brings us back in time with Mikhail Gorbachev passing away and the old USSR and all. So I want to thank you all. It was always a lot of fun. Thanks for those that gave me a tip during the show. It's much appreciated. See you Saturday at 20 hours UTC. And we're going to say goodbye. See you Saturday. And take care, my friends. Hey, Kimberly, K6YYL. Oh, not copyrighted, Dr. Sisson. Never had a strike with this. This is Radio Moscow would play this just before the top of the hour in their news bulletin. So if they had some time left at the end of their hour of transmission, sometimes they'd play the interval signal, but often they'd play this song that would reach top of the hour, and then it'd go into the news. They would go into the Kremlin chimes and then into the news bulletin. Take care, my friends. Love you all. Stay safe. See you Saturday.